Good morning, everyone. God's will is always reasonable and very often countercultural. God's will is always reasonable and very often countercultural. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you, not as the world gives, do I give it to you. A couple weeks ago, we looked at the scripture where Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice and they follow me." And we were looking at, how do we hear God's voice? Is it a booming, thunderous voice? It is not. It's the still small voice that happens when we see a need and we can fill it. It's reason, supernatural light of faith, could be circumstances. Maybe it's even a person who comes in and invites us to meet a need. So he speaks in all of these different ways. My sheep hear my voice and they follow me. The example that we gave was Kendrick Castillo. Remember, he was the young man that when they brandished the weapon in the classroom, he ran towards the weapon. And he did so because time and time again, he would see a need and he would run to it. That he would hear the voice of God, knowing that he could make a difference in that particular instance. So when the word went out that somebody had gone down, that somebody was shot, that somebody sacrificed themselves, it was natural that people thought of Kendrick. So it's an invitation for us that we continue to cultivate a disposition towards meeting a need when we see it. So we hear the voice of God and we follow it. Now, what exactly is God's love and this innovation that Jesus talks about? A new commandment I give you, love one another as I have loved you. Well, who? Who do we love and how? Well, who would be extending all the way to our enemies? Certainly our friends, our family, that's an easy one. But Jesus says, if you are going to love as I have loved you, then you will even go to the point of loving your enemies. Now, that doesn't mean that we like them, doesn't mean that we tolerate injustice. Okay. What it does mean is that we are praying for those who may be coming after us in some regard or giving us a hard time. Pray for them. Think of an enemy right now. Think of them, somebody who's really giving you a hard time or for some reason is, well, if we're going to love as Jesus loves us, see, because while we were still sinners, he died for us, then that means we love even those who are persecuting us, those whom we would call enemies. Now, how? Well, we looked at two things that Jesus said that were just, again, completely new. Turn the other cheek. Now, turn the other cheek does not mean some source of passivity. Natural light of reason, there will be times where we need to run from a situation. It's wise to run in this situation. In some situations, it's wise to turn and fight. Now, a lot of times, it's the loving thing to turn the other cheek. And again, turning the other cheek is standing your ground and acting in such a way that brings that person to a whole new spiritual understanding. So the example I gave was Mother Teresa. She asked for bread for her starving children in the orphanage. The baker spit in her face. Now, she could have ran. It was a form of aggression. He was very aggressive to her. He spit right in her face. She could have ran. She could have stood her ground and fought him intellectually, She was an extremely intelligent person. She could have batted him around, in any way, belittled him. Oh, a big man, here you are, spitting in, the face of a nun who's 4 feet tall. And could have gone on and on and on and berated him. She didn't fight him. She didn't run from him. She stood there and just simply said, "Thank you for that gift," talking about spitting in her face. "Thank you for that gift for me. Now, what will you give the children?" And that wise and charitable response changed that man in an instant, and for the rest of his life, he gave bread to her orphanage. So God calls us to turn the other cheek. A lot of times not to run, a lot of times not to fight, but to find some way that will change hearts and minds, standing our ground. Now, he also says, "Love one another as I have loved you," literally means to lay down one's life. Well, that example of Kendrick, already we have that. More than likely, though, we're not going to be called to something in that fashion. It can be the little things too. Laying down your life for someone that loves you but maybe is not showing it. The example that I gave you was Father Tom. So Father Tom Falkenthal, he was a Navy chaplain. He was over at Naval Station while I was there in Pearl Harbor. And he was pivotal in helping me to have a deeper relationship with Christ. And we worked together quite a bit in Bible study and RCIA. It was an amazing time for me in my faith. Then it was time for him to move on. He was going to another naval station. And it was sad to hear that he was going. And in fact, I had a hard time with it. And the way that I dealt with it was just, I was out. He was like, "Hey, let's get together." And I just didn't have time for him. I know it was hurtful. And looking back, I know that was hurtful to him. But I was trying to figure it out myself. Finally, he said, "Well, I'm leaving in 2 days." And I said, "All right, well, I can come for dinner." And I came for dinner, and as busy as he is, I didn't have a gift for him. I didn't have a going-away card. But yet, he had a gift for me. And it was the New Jerusalem Bible commentary. He knew how much I was loving the Scriptures. This was not a book that you would find on the shelf everywhere. He probably had to go to a specialty store, probably had to order it, make sure that it's in time, wrap it, get it all ready to go. I tell you, it was an epiphany for me when I showed up there to say goodbye, and to this man who had helped me in so many ways, and yet I just had nothing to give him. And he took out that gift and he gave it to me. And I realized, here he is, showing me this sincere and real and palpable care and concern, even when I was not showing it to him. And he's the one that changed my life. Well, love one another as I have loved you. I know we don't always feel that love from those who should be loving us. Well, we love them anyway. And we realize that's Christ's call. Love one another as I have loved you. Now, today, we're looking at this peace that God gives. Well, God's will is always reasonable, and very often it's countercultural. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. See, the world says that you will experience peace, I will experience peace by popularity, by money, by some sort of prestige or power, by certain pleasures. And Jesus says, not as the world gives do I give it. The peace that Jesus gives comes from clarity. Peace comes from clarity of God's will. I would encourage you to think of a few instances in your life because it's good to reaffirm those. When there was a difficulty, there was a challenge, you thought it through, and there was clarity and there was peace, but maybe there wasn't an emotional comfort. There wasn't exactly it was not a popular decision. Maybe it was not a pleasurable one, or maybe it didn't bring you power or respect from others. When I think about that myself, I think of going into the military right out of high school. I didn't want to burden my family with regards to finances, although I had some scholarships and other types of things. I chose to serve the country and to gain money with a GI Bill. I remember telling my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, and he was not happy. In fact, he was disappointed. Denny, I'm disappointed in you. Sorry, Pop. I prayed about it. I think this is the right thing. You know, in entering, I experienced a lot of adversity there. I can still remember my mother being so angry at me for doing that. But I told her, I prayed about it, I thought about it, and I think I have clarity and I have peace. Now, that day when it came to go to boot camp, that a lot of emotion there and not a difficult situation. But even in the emotion, deep down, there was peace because there was clarity. 2 months later, my grandfather traveled 1,000 miles to be at the boot camp graduation. And there he said some different words. Denny, I'm proud of you. After the military, I was heading towards state school in Pennsylvania. I'd done 6 years in the Navy, and I wanted to just kind of get right into college. But I was involved with youth work at the time, and somebody said to me, you really ought to consider something different than college. 1 more year. Take some time to volunteer. In particular, I think that your gifts and talents would be great in national evangelization teams. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. It was traveling for 8 months, 1 suitcase, 1 backpack. But there was something about, taking some time off and maybe giving of myself in that way. The individual said, why don't I give you the application? I said, great. And I left it there at her house. Okay. So Rob and Cleo Eubanks. They ended up sending it to me, and I filled it out, and I thought to myself, all right, it was very life-giving in filling this out. If they accept me, I'll do it. Well, a month and a half later, I got the acceptance letter, and my roommate said, did you get accepted? And I was like, yeah. And he said, well, isn't that what you wanted? And I was like, I guess. And I was not filled with a lot of positive emotion, and yet there was a peace deep down that I knew this is what God was calling me to do. And it was through NET that in 1994, in October of 94, I came to do a parish retreat. The parish retreat was for Sacred Heart of Mary in Weirton, West Virginia. It's interesting how God continues to lead us. It's the peace that God gives, and not as the world. It's not always going to be that experience of comfort. Again, popularity, power, pleasure, prestige. It's the peace that comes from clarity of, yes, I know this is what you are calling me to do. As God continues to stir in us, we can open our hearts to Him and really allowing Him to continue to help us to see what He's calling us to do and to realize I might not be filled with a bunch of great emotion, but I could be filled with a peace that no one can take. Peace is my gift to you, not as the world gives it, do I give it to you.